Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum featuring our two candidates for Kittitas County Sheriff, Clay Myers and Bart Olson. My name is Steve DuPont. I am the moderator this evening, and thank you all for joining us. Here's going to be the format of tonight's forum. I'm going to be asking a series of questions that were submitted by chamber members. We'll let the two candidates begin with an opening statement that'll be limited to 2 minutes. And then after that, we'll move into questions. We've got Gemma from the Chamber of Commerce staff. She is our timekeeper this evening. She'll be holding up cards to give them a 30-second warning, and then the time's up when they'll need to wrap up whatever sentence they're currently speaking. When we get into the question and answer section, the candidates will be given a chance to do a 30-second rebuttal. And so they'll just simply indicate by raising a hand or saying rebuttal, please. And we'll do that as soon as the other candidate's time is up. So with that, let's begin. And we're going to do the opening statements. Sheriff Myers, would you like to begin with your opening statement, please?
Certainly. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Clay Myers, and I just started my 35th year with the Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office is a $10 million a year business with 90 full-time employees. We have a 200-plus bed jail facility, staffed with control room operators, corrections officers, and clerical staff. They're responsible for meeting the needs of the inmates and providing services. Their training includes de-escalation, transports to courts. They're very well versed and trained in screening and assisting in the recognition of narcotics dependencies, mental health, and then providing the programs associated for those. They work in conjunction with mental health officers, mental health counselors, and addiction programs. We have an administrative division, a detective division, which is responsible for complex crimes, narcotics investigations, registered sex offender verification, crimes against people, crimes against property. We have a patrol division that's comprised of a patrol unit. We have our Marine units that function under patrol, our reserve units, swiftwater rescue, ice rescue, search and rescue, and our citizen patrol. We have the largest training budget. We have the broadest and the most diverse training of any law enforcement agency in the county, because our deputies are responsible for traffic safety, crime prevention, criminal investigations, and all of the units we just talked about. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, sir. And just one quick reminder before Mr. Olson starts his opening statement. Would you mind please muting your microphone each time you complete talking, just in case there's any sort of feedback or background noise. So thank you. Mr. Olson, your opening statement, please.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to the Chamber for allowing me this opportunity to do this forum. So my name is Bart Olson, and I want to be your next Kittitas County Sheriff. I live in the Thorpe area with my wife, Brenda. We've been married for almost 25 years, and our daughter, Madeline, was born and raised in Kittitas County. She's currently going to college studying a nursing degree. I have served over 20 years in law enforcement, and 25 of that was with the Washington State Patrol, and I recently completed my career and retired from the Washington State Patrol as a sergeant. The majority of my career has been in Kittitas County, and I've actually worked in 8 other counties on various details during my career. My career began while coming to Ellensburg here and going to Central Washington University, where I obtained my bachelor's degree. I also joined the Kittitas County Sheriff Reserve organization. So I served as a reserve, and then upon graduating from Central, I got a job working in the county jail. I worked in the county jail for a period of time, and then I was hired by the Washington State Patrol as a Mancha cadet, and eventually to the academy. And then I graduated the academy and went to North Bend in King County. As soon as I had an opportunity, I transferred back to Ellensburg as a trooper. Served as a trooper until 2013 when I promoted to sergeant. And then I had supervisory authority of a detachment in Monroe. As soon as the opportunity presented itself again, I transferred back to Kittitas County because that's where I wanted to be home. And I supervised a detachment of troopers here in Ellensburg. Throughout my career, I have built a progressive reputation of trust, compassion, integrity, honesty, accountability, and professionalism. I have served, like I said, in multiple jurisdictions across the state and making our roads safer, and have supervised a wide range of criminal investigations and trained other people. Accountability and safety are important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, it's going to be time to launch into our questions. And the way I'm going to do it is we're going to alternate back and forth who answers the question first. And since Sheriff Myers went first on the opening statement, we're going to have Mr. Olson answer the first question first. So the question is, what do you see as the single biggest issue facing law enforcement in Kittitas County today, and how do you plan to address it if you're elected sheriff?
The single most important issue I see in Kittitas County has to do with drugs and the drug crimes that come with it into our county. And going hand in hand with drugs is some of the mental issues that come from people using and abusing drugs. So one of my priorities as sheriff is to get a task force together of all local agencies and have regular meetings and have a task force to where we can combat and target these, these people using drugs and selling drugs, and then putting them in touch with the correct people that may be able to help them, but target the big dealers. And involved in that is going to be inviting other local counties, so Chelan County, Douglas, or Grant County, and Yakima counties. Bringing them to the table and periodically being able to share information where we might be able to solve big crimes with one another. So that's really important to me. It's not currently being done, and it's something that I think that we need to take a proactive approach in our county to combat the drug issue and the mental issues that come from using drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Myers. And throughout this thing, if you ever need me to repeat a question, just let me know. So go ahead, sir. Oh, you need to unmute yourself, though. That's going to be one of the hassles of this whole unmuting thing.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of a tough question because we are such a diverse county. We're such a large county with 2,300 square miles, and we get our priorities change fairly routinely. The impacts from drugs and mental health are probably two of the top things that we have to address almost all of the time. And so we used to do task forces. And what we found is that task forces are real good for identifying a problem and coming up with some solutions. But we try to implement those solutions with our patrol and our detectives, with our street crimes units, and with our PROACT teams. Task forces that remain in effect to create the solution and implement the solution oftentimes become sort of self-serving. And all of the law enforcement here, the executives here, and we meet regularly and discuss narcotics and violent crime, as well as our, when these large property crime rings come in. And what we have determined is that the best approach, the best way to combat this, is literally through our street crimes units and proactive approach in those specific areas. It's worked very well with us when we're setting up narcotics operations. It's worked very well with us when we're targeting gang members who are conducting criminal activity in our county, whether it's at Snoqualmie Pass, Vantage, Ellensburg, or Thorpe. They move in, they identify the problem, and they come up with a solution. It varies. Right now, we have vehicle prowl rings that are working, and so the team is putting together a response to that. Mental health, we're working with all of our providers right now throughout the state and our legislators to address those, especially with respect to our jail and how we're housing them, looking at diversion programs and things of that nature. And the narcotics and the mental health things seem to go sort of hand in hand. So again, not a simple problem, but we actually have solutions and we're working on those solutions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in our spirit of alternating, you'll essentially be answering 2 questions in a row from here on out. So this next question will be for Sheriff Myers to answer first. And training is important in law enforcement. Please discuss the training you have had over your career and what your plan would be as sheriff to train your deputies and staff.
Training is one of my top 3 priorities. I've laid that out in every one of my budget proposals. We have the largest training budget, as I mentioned before. Since I've worked in every division and commanded every division in our agency, I've been trained in every and certified in every one of our divisions. I've also participated in and led all of our special units and all of our teams. Once becoming a command level person, I went through and got my state career level certifications in supervisor, middle management, and executive. I'm a graduate of the Command College for Law Enforcement and Tactical Command College. I've received executive level training through WASPIC and the Criminal Justice Training Center in use of force, anti-bias policing, budgeting for law enforcement, civil process, and management of internal investigations. And we have an extremely good program. So I've been trained and have certifications in all of the areas. I've also have training in emergency management and have been our incident commander in 6 of our disasters. The end.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Olson.
Yeah, so the training I went through is when I first started as a reserve officer, it was 240 hours of training to become a certified law enforcement officer. And eventually I was able to actually patrol in the county on my own with a short period of time. I attended a month-long academy at Criminal Justice Training Center when I became a correction officer. And then when I went to the State Patrol, I attended a 6-month training academy, learning basically all aspects of law enforcement. Since that time, I've received yearly up-to-date training, bias training, use of force training, crisis intervention training, and that's something I've stayed on top of and make sure I have those certifications. I've received additional training since then. I was a field training officer, so I went through a field training officer academy. I have been through incident management training myself to where I can manage scenes. I've managed many scenes out here as a sergeant. And throughout my career, what I've done is and especially when I became sergeant, it was really important for me to train up future officers and to develop them. Because as a sergeant, I wanted to train the next generation of people to take over the job. And since I retired, I know it's in good hands. And that's something I will continue to do throughout my career. And just even in the last couple of years, I actually trained the entire sheriff's office on spike strip training and how to be safe when deploying spikes. And then even just the recommendation how to do felony procedures after pursuits had taken place. So my goal as a supervisor when I was here is to make my officers safe, to develop them, and help them throughout their careers. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, our third question is more towards the administrative side of being the sheriff and the head of the entire sheriff's office. If you had the luxury of an increased budget, what areas of the sheriff's office do you think need budget enhancements the most? And I believe that, yeah, Mr. Olson, your turn to go first.
Okay, and go ahead and repeat that question one more time. you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. If you had the luxury of an increased budget, you had more money to spend essentially, what areas of the sheriff's office do you currently think are in the most need of increased budget?
Okay. Well, I definitely think if we could increase the budget somehow, that definitely more officers is always a plus. I think looking at the call volumes and looking at the growth of Kittitas County, I definitely see the need that we're going to need more deputies, and I think being on top of it early on is going to be important. With that being said, I do like the idea of having an Upper County West precinct or West office for officers to be home and stay up there. And hopefully with that in mind, hopefully we can hire deputies and or reserves or people from that area that want to stay in the Upper County and work that area. So that would be a priority if that increased budget was to occur. So more deputies and then the infrastructure to support them.
Great, thank you very much. Sheriff Myers?
Well, I think that, if we're talking about money for programs or money for personnel or money for capital improvements, first and foremost, I would put medical staff in our jail facility. We have always struggled with contracting. It's a very difficult thing, and we don't feel that the medical services for our inmates has ever really been as much as we would like. We'd like to actually have medical staff in our facility 5 days a week. We'd like to have access to doctors and mental health professionals on more of a full-time basis. If it were facilities, dollars in the budget, then absolutely transitioning of our search and rescue program from the lower county to the upper county. Over 70% of our calls for service for search and rescue are in the upper county. One of the first things that I built a strategic plan for was opening a West precinct in the upper county and initiated talks with all of the mayor how to set up a facility up there that would enhance law enforcement services, not only for the sheriff's office, but for the municipalities up there. And so I would put money towards that facility. With that facility, I'd like it to be a full-time facility. I think that, looking at current growth, the developments, traffic infrastructure, I think we're going to need a full-service facility. So we're going to need the ability to have full-time deputies up there. We're going to need evidence and property room. We're going to need clerical staff and support services as well as a supervisor. So depending on where you want to give me money, those are the areas I spend it.
Okay, thank you very much. So this question will be for Sheriff Myers to answer first, and it's basically the opposite question. Conversely, a more likely scenario in the future is that governments across the board are going to have reduced budgets, and it's caused by reducing tax revenues from the pandemic. Would you be more in favor of belt tightening or seeking increased revenue from county citizens?
Well, you just want to make me unpopular with one side or the other there. Well, again, belt tightening always has to come first. Our budgets already, we utilize grants, we utilize different revenue sources, we utilize taxes. And, the citizens here in Kittitas County have always been very supportive. Our 3/10 and our 1/10 sales taxes have just been instrumental in us being able to provide for public safety. And so I'm not opposed to asking the public if they want to support more law enforcement. But if we're being hit and need to kind of tighten things up, then that means everybody else is too. And we're not an island. We have the largest budget. So it would literally have to be a combination of both.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Olson?
Yes, sir. So I would be a fan of tightening budgets where possible and not going to the citizens and asking for more money unless it was absolutely necessary. again, I agree that 3/10 and 1% tax that our citizens passed, and you know, that it's in place. They're supportive of our law enforcement. I think down the road, if we had to ask them to do more, it would be great. But I think it's important to tighten the budget, and tighten the belt, and not have if it's a specialty item we have to get rid of or sell or do to make the ends meet, then we by all means need to do that. One of the things I see is we have a jail facility that has 209 beds, and I think currently there's only about 70 inmates in there. And I think that jail space is limited across the state, and it's jail space we could be renting out and you know, helping other counties out and making up for budget shortfalls, you know, possibly by using that space. So tightening the belt, it can be done. There's ways to do it. And even if the citizens currently, or if there wasn't a reason to do it right now, I think it's a reason as sheriff I would always be doing, and just try and be very frugal with the county citizens' money.
Okay, thanks. All right, gentlemen, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. One of the hot topics around the nation right now is the subject of police reform, and frankly, it's probably an inevitability here in our state capitol at their next legislative session. Government officials around the nation have been suggesting various different concepts, such as limiting the purchases of military surplus equipment, increased training, and around the use of force, restricting use of force, or increasing transparency in terms of your reporting of incidents that require the use of force. So do you support the concept of police reform, and if so, in what way, and if not, why? Mr. Olson?
Okay, sorry, I was looking at Sheriff Myers there. Yes, I mean, police reform is it's something that's going to be taking place, and it's something that's gone on throughout my career. Policing has constantly evolved, and I think it's actually gotten better from day one when I got in until now. It's become harder at times to do law enforcement, but I think overall we've become better through training, required training. I talked about it before, the crisis intervention training reduced our use of forces, and it allowed officers to have a means to identify those people in crisis. And so I think that's very important. I think we can continue to evolve in that way, whether they call that police reform or not. I mean, it's been evolving throughout my career. And I think constantly giving people the up-to-date training, and you know, what the citizens and what the public want, then we need to continue doing that. It needs to be balanced, though. I mean, there's got to be balance on both sides with police reform, and that's something that I would fight for. Is you know, people need to understand how stressful it is to be a law enforcement job. It's extremely stressful on officers, on families, and the officers are the community. So, you know, they play a crucial role in police reform as well. And so whatever we could do to make policing better for the citizens, better for the police, to where they're not threatened as much, then I'm not opposed to police reform, as long as the intent is proper and it keeps officers and the community safer. I'm not against police reform and support it.
Okay, thank you very much. Sheriff Myers?
Just a quick point of clarification. Prior to COVID, I had signed contracts and agreements with a number of outside municipalities, federal and state agencies to house their inmates. In fact, we were housing inmates from other jurisdictions fairly routinely prior to COVID. We put a lot of that stuff on hold for obvious reasons. With respect to police reform, I'll touch first on, you mentioned the military surplus things. You know, we don't get bayonets and tanks. Most of what we get from the military surplus are things that assist us, equipment for search and rescue, blankets for the jail, cots, so that if we can supplement the Red Cross during disasters and evacuations. These are the kind of things that we get from military surplus. With respect to police reform, we're always reforming. I'm tied in and serve on the WASPIC Legislative Committee, and we, a few years ago, when Sue Rahr, who was selected to be on President Obama's police reform task force, when they finished their work and they brought those 10 items back, we sat down and we went over those, and we were doing 9 out of the 10 things that they recommended. So police reform is something that you don't wait for, and we've never waited for, and I, as the sheriff, haven't waited for. You look ahead, you see what's changing, you look at the expectations, you constantly review your policies, you constantly review your training, and you evaluate what you're doing and how you're doing it. We investigate every complaint. We use transparency and outside agencies to investigate our complaints. We track all of our complaints, all of our use of force. We analyze it to see if we have a personnel problem, a policy problem, or if we have a training problem. So it's ongoing. As you know, we're evolving as a nation. We evolve constantly in policing, and so it's just something we've always done and will continue to do.
Okay, thank you. So this question will go to Sheriff Myers. What is your position on the use of body-worn cameras by deputies?
I think it's a great thing. I should have mentioned this when you mentioned the unlimited budget that you're going to give me. I might hold you to that. But body-worn cameras, one of the reasons that we haven't already done this, we have cameras in every one of our cars and mines. And it presented and still presents substantial storage problems with respect to the media, because we have to retain that and then make it available for either criminal cases or internal investigations or public disclosure. Axion and a couple of the other manufacturers have now created cloud-based data storage. So it's becoming much more cost effective. I'm convinced through my work with the legislative committee in WASPIC that I believe there's going to be a legislative support for body-worn cameras through the state level police reform, if not the national. And I support that wholeheartedly. You know, a camera just gives a view. It's helpful in supporting law enforcement when they've done something right. It's helpful in identifying law enforcement or suspects or the crowd when they've done something wrong. There's just no downside to it other than, you know, the public's expectations. You have to have a policy and things in place so that you can access that video and make it available. But you also have to be cautious with body-worn cameras, because we catch people at their worst. And there are some things that just don't need to be on film. You know, there are crises that you're going to be in somebody's home. And so there has to be a little bit of caution involved with that as well. But absolutely support it. And I'm hoping that we get some funding and some direction from the legislature so that we can make that a reality. If not, I'm going to seek it in our own budget.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Olson.
Yes, sir. I am also supportive of body-worn cameras. I do know that they're very expensive, and then the public, you know, the public disclosure part of it is a piece that ties up a lot of time and you know, resources to fill public disclosure requests. So I'm very supportive of cameras. Throughout my career, when VHS cameras first started coming out, I immediately wanted a VHS camera. I realized it didn't change my demeanor, but it had a very big change on suspects' demeanor, and it captured things on camera, which were very important. A camera isn't a solve-all. It doesn't always capture events exactly how they occurred. There's just, you know, it's just the way the camera is set up. It doesn't always catch things. But I think body-worn cameras, in addition to a car camera, is a very valuable tool. And like I say, I think in most cases it protects the officer It shortens court cases for the prosecutors. There's a lot more plea deals that way. And I think for those instances where there could be a bad officer or something like that, as long as the cameras are being reviewed periodically, and when I was with the State Patrol, we'd have to watch 10 videos per trooper, you know, for 2 times a year, in addition to the use of forces, complaints, and all the other stuff. So the camera is a valuable tool, and the body-worn camera would also be valuable to where you can have the accountability piece that's necessary for law enforcement, protecting them, protecting the agency, protecting the citizens, and protecting the suspects. So I'm supportive of them.
Okay, thank you very much. Shift gears now to the jail. As you guys have both talked about a little bit in your prior answers, it is under the command of the sheriff. And I want to ask you guys what you would do in basically your worst nightmare situation in this pandemic, which is that you have a major outbreak where maybe a majority of your inmates and staff test positive. How are you going to handle that nightmare? Mr. Olson?
Okay. Well, you know, first off, having the personal protective equipment in place for all the employees and the training to identify when people are sick, and then having the resources available through the hospital and through the health director here in the county to help those situations where we have an outbreak. Working with the courts, working with the prosecutor to see if people can do electronic home monitoring, or if we can, we'll just isolate people within the jail. And like I say, currently the jail isn't fully staffed or fully filled. There's 209 beds, so currently it looks like there's not a problem quarantining people if we had to within the jail. And every inmate can virtually have their own cell, so we can isolate that way, and then just making sure that we had the medical staff on hand to come and tend to them and make sure these people are safe. It's going to take a cooperation with multiple groups in an outbreak. Fortunately, we haven't seen an outbreak at the jail here, and hopefully we don't. I think it's because good protocols are in place, checking temperatures and not booking people into jail when we can just refer charges later on them. But with that being said, we need to keep our community safe, and there are going to be people we have to keep incarcerated, whether they're sick with COVID or not. And that's just where having those good protocols in place, and we're going to do our job and make that happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Sheriff Myers?
Well, I wish every inmate could have his own cell, but even though we're down to 70-ish inmates, not everyone can have their own cell. One of the first things that we did when COVID hit is we sat down and we developed a response plan. And we developed this plan in coordination with our public health official. This plan has been approved by our public health official. And it covers how we handle inmates now when they come in. Every inmate is screened. All of our staff are screened. Our staff have personal protective equipment. We have personal protective equipment for the inmates. We've set up isolation and quarantine areas within our facility, so new inmates that come in are quarantined. One of the things you have to remember when running a jail facility is classification. In other words, you can't mix everybody with everybody, COVID aside. So there are a number of factors that determine who can be housed with who. Sometimes that's easy to do, sometimes it's very difficult. We have an annex in our facility that's a completely different type and a more modern type of a housing unit than the old facility, but they're dependent on each other. You can't just shut one down. And so if things go very bad, if we do get a major outbreak in there, we have a plan in place that will isolate those inmates, isolate those staff, and we also have a plan in place should staff members become too ill to work. We have a plan in place where we can replace them, and the same thing with our inmates in medical attention. So we're prepared for that.
Do you have a little rebuttal along those lines?
Please go ahead.
So early on during COVID, the jail and commander and the current sheriff removed the BAC, or want their BAC removed from within the jail. And to me, that is an officer safety concern, because it's the only facility where there is backup immediately available to process somebody for DUI. And while their intent may have been good, they checked with the Washington State Patrol and found out that was not going to be a hazard to keep the BAC functional. And currently, they want to remove it, and I think it's an officer safety concern. Thank you.
Okay.
If I may.
Yeah. Yep.
The decision we made a couple of decisions with respect to COVID that were supported by the public health official. One of those was to stop interstate transfers within our facility. The idea is to protect both law enforcement officers and the inmates from COVID. That was the priority. Moving the BAC from that location to another location is a decision that's based on health and the safety of the inmates. Convenience didn't come into it. It's a little bit more inconvenient to have to go somewhere else, but we're trained to deal with inmates and people in our custody. That's our job.
Okay, thanks guys. We have to move on here. We did get a question from a community member who's watching live, and it's a good one, so I'm just going to ask it to you right now. Here in Kittitas County, as you guys both know, you have to collaborate with the other law enforcement agencies in the county. Can you speak about a time you worked when you worked with the other law enforcement agencies? And in general, I'm going to add, can you talk a little bit about your philosophy in that sort of cross-agency collaboration? And Mr. Olson, it's your turn to answer this question first, please.
Okay. Well, I can think of, there's been many instances where we've worked well with all the other agencies. And I mean, it has to do with the natural disasters, Taylor Bridge fire, big collisions on I-90, you know, all kinds of instances. I've helped with search and rescue events. And I think as agencies, we work very well with each other. I think that can be enhanced over time for sure. But yeah, work really well with the deputies, the city officers, and we back each other up because we have very limited resources out here. And you know, there may only be a couple officers on at one time in the entire county. And I think it's really important that we have those good relationships. We build those relationships and we work with one another and help each other out. And I can't give specific events because a lot of the ones I think of, they're tragic events. I mentioned a few, Taylor Bridge, but I mean, we worked well with each other, and we would basically, we'd all have a different role or work collectively, doing evacuations, whatever it may be. And I think that relationship is important to me, something I will continue to build on and make sure that that's always in place, and that each individual officer also has, you know, works at that same idea.
Thank you very much. Sheriff Myers?
Boy, just countless events where we've worked well with other agencies. I've worked with other agencies as a diver with teams from Grant County, King County, Tacoma, Pierce County, Yakima, on diving operations, whether it's searching for drowning victims or the recovery of evidence. As a tactical team member, as a tactical commander, we've worked with Yakima County, Grant County, King County, Seattle, some of the federal authorities on operations ranging from illicit marijuana grows in the mountains to methamphetamine and you know, other large drug operations. We've worked with in Swiftwater Rescue. We've partnered with certified people from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, and our fire services. I've commanded as the incident commander in a number of our large-scale operations. Most recently, the fugitive manhunt up on Blewett Pass, which involved, we had up to 100 local law enforcement, state and federal law enforcement and agents in the field at one time, including aircraft. Everything went exceptionally well. The coordination and work amongst individual law enforcement agencies is enhanced by our Mutual Police Powers Act, our mutual aid agreements, which we have in place across the state and with our neighbors. I signed agreements with both Yakima County and Chelan County, to be able to assist each other and work together on those fringe border areas that are way up in the hills. So I could spend the rest of the evening talking about specific instances where we work very well together.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Olson, did you want to rebuttal there?
Yeah, he brought something up that I think is important. And during the manhunt for the murder of Ian Eccles, I know for a fact that the Border Patrol and Immigration Customs Enforcement offered to have up to approximately 45 to 55 Border Patrol and man tracker people come up and assist on the manhunt for that suspect. And that resource was turned down. And so the suspect was outstanding for a period of time. It ended well. He got caught from a citizen, and I would never turn that kind of resource down on a known criminal.
Okay. All right then. Moving on, I think I'm going to jump over one question, maybe come back to it, because we got onto an issue there that I have on my list, which is collaboration with federal law enforcement. Particularly ICE has been one in the news. Some jurisdictions around the country have said we're absolutely not going to work with immigrations and custom enforcement. What is your position on collaborating with federal law enforcement officials, but particularly answering to the question of ICE? And so, Sheriff Myers, your turn to answer first, please.
Well, a lot of this question is actually governed by law. My philosophy is very straightforward. We work with our federal partners. There's a federal law requiring local law enforcement and state law enforcement to cooperate and work and share information back and forth with federal law enforcement. A lot of this stemmed out of 9/11 because we were trying to bridge communications gaps between federal and state and local law enforcement. So we work with them routinely. We work with all of them on criminal investigations. With respect to ICE, there are areas where the public and state law have an expectation that we will not cooperate with them, and that primarily centers around immigration and federal administrative law. We don't enforce federal administrative law, and we don't hold people based on a presented detainer in our jail. Those are legal questions. They're not really based on philosophy or what we want to do. However, we do have to, you go where the information is. And so if we're conducting a criminal investigation, such as maybe it's human trafficking, it could be anything. And we have developed suspects, and those suspects are here illegally. ICE has the information, that's where you would go. If it had something to do with forensics, you go to the crime lab. That we have to have those communications because they're the ones that are going to be able to help us find that person or to help us put a stop to that human trafficking ring, because we have intel on what's happening here. They have intel on what's happening throughout the country, and so you don't want to miss a big link to a bigger picture of something that's occurring in a criminal investigation because you just simply refuse to talk to a federal agency because there's a portion of that federal agency that you don't agree with. We have an obligation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olson.
Yeah, I think we have to support all our federal partners, whatever it may be. Again, I agree. The state law prevents us from doing the administrative enforcement and working with ICE. And so I totally understand where that comes from. On the criminal warrants and criminal aspect of ICE, that's where we do need to be supportive. ICE investigates so many different crimes, and it's important that, I mean, they do human trafficking, they do prostitution, they do drug crimes, they do gang stuff. And so I think what we, if we can support them in that kind of role, not an administrative role, and unless that somehow changes on a statewide level, then we need to do what we can as local law enforcement to support the ICE agents and their jobs. And what we're doing is, it's about criminal accountability, and criminals need to be held accountable. And from what I understand, there's between 14 and 20 million undocumented people in the country. They contribute to this society in various ways. And that is not the people that ICE are targeting. They are targeting the criminals that are exploiting children, exploiting the vulnerable people, and bringing the drugs into our community. So, you know, they have their own job to do, we have our job to do, but at times we're gonna have to work collaboratively to prevent these things from harming our community. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm actually going to ask you a question now that doesn't have to do with policing. My question is, it has to do with, I mean, if you're the sheriff, you're kind of a role model for a lot of the citizens here. People look up to the sheriff as a figurehead and a role model. And so I'm curious to know, what's your community involvement like in Kittitas County? How long have you lived here, and what sorts of things are you involved in? So Mr. Olson?
Okay. Yeah, so I've lived here since 1991 and kept my residence here almost the entire time, except for the 3 years that I was in North Bend as a trooper. Even when I promoted, I went to Monroe. My wife and daughter stayed here. It was my primary residence. I stayed at a family's house on the west side because I love Kittitas County and didn't want to leave it. Throughout my time here, I've been a Kittitas Valley junior soccer coach for my daughter and other children. I've done 4-H events from the time she started in 4-H, and actually before that. My wife has been a 4-H leader for almost 30-something years, I believe. And so I've participated with that. I've assisted with the Shop with a Cop / firefighter fundraiser and given back to the community and maybe kids who may be in need. I've done that from the day that that started. And every year I go out, I look for volunteers to do it. I look for ways to fund it. And I've supported CASA, the court advocated special advocates, court appointed special advocates. I've helped the fundraiser there. I helped with the law enforcement torch run, and that was the Cops on Top fundraiser. I part of Morning Rotary, and just whatever I could do to help the community. The Troopers Association, every year they would donate something to our community one way or another. Sometimes it was Shop with a Cop firefighter, sometimes other events. So I care about this community. I care about giving back to this community. Recently went up with Fish Food Bank and gave out meals to kids for summer meals. And so anything I could do to give back to this community is important to me and show them that law enforcement cares.
Thank you. Sheriff Myers?
Thank you, Will. I came to work here right out of the Army, so I've been here since 1985. Met my lovely wife, and we raised a family here. I've participated in Special Olympics fundraisers, Yakima River cleanup, volunteered to go into the mountains after hunting season and clean up camps, environmental processes. Currently co-chair our environmental sustainability committee. I've been with Rotary for over 7 years, and we do cleanup projects at the West Interchange. Volunteered painting the Ellensburg Animal Hospital, the Ellensburg Animal Shelter, not the hospital, the shelter. Recently volunteered with some other members there in Morning Rotary to put up, we built a fence in the backyard area of the animal shelter, so that they'd have two areas to exercise the dogs down there. Volunteered with members of KVFR to build handicap ramps in the community for folks who have trouble navigating stairs or who just need a temporary ramp while they're recovering from the surgery. Served as the chair of the meth action team. I served on the domestic violence task force. Served on the Ellensburg rodeo boards. Currently serve on the Kittitas County Fair board. That's all I think of off the top of my head.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. I only have one more question, then we'll go to closing statements. And this one's hot off the press today, just a few hours before our forum tonight. The Governor Inslee and his health secretary announced that he's got some tighter statewide restrictions on number of people getting together. If I understood him correctly, everybody basically has to wear a mask anytime they've left their own house. This all goes into effect next Thursday. So my question is, what is your position on the sheriff's office enforcing these types of state orders? And how would you respond to what would you tell your deputies to do if somebody actually called in a complaint of somebody who is violating one of these orders, which the governor said is a misdemeanor? Sheriff Myers?
Well, that's a good question and pretty timely, because I watched the governor's conference today in conjunction with my command staff, and immediately following that, directed our staff to work with the Unified Command Section of our INT, the law enforcement branch, and develop two things. One is a unified response. Now, this unified response isn't just the sheriff's office. In other words, I work daily with the Washington Association of Sheriffs, and we also work with the Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. And what we decided early on is that we need a unified message and a unified approach across our state, not different agencies trying to do different things. And we were all in agreement at the executive level, which was supported even by the governor's initial restrictions, is that we would take an enforcement level of education. What we're going to be doing now following this is we're going to step that up and provide specific information. As we speak, I have staff that's developing cards that we can hand out to people. The idea there is to ensure people understand the benefits of wearing a mask. Ensure that they understand that this isn't about restricting freedoms, it's about safety. And as law enforcement, what I've shared with my deputies is that we put ourselves at risk routinely, at discomfort routinely, to protect the public. We're certainly, wearing a mask is about the slightest inconvenience I could think of if it's going to protect somebody else. And so we need to share that with them. And when we respond to complaints about people not wearing masks, that's exactly what we're going to do. Everything that we can to convince them that it's the right thing to do and show them the benefits of it.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Olson.
Yeah, Steve, do you mind just repeating the question just so I can make sure I answer it accurately?
Sure. So I'll cut through all the context. Basically, the governor's got some tighter orders going into effect next week. What is your position on the sheriff's office enforcing these state health orders, which he said basically constitute a misdemeanor? And how would you direct your deputies if somebody were to actively call in and complain about somebody who's violating them?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I believe the mask order, I mean, I believe that we need to keep people safe. We're seeing a spike in it now. We just see a spike in this county. So I definitely agree that we need to just continue with the educational part of it. And I haven't even been in a business recently where everyone's been wearing a mask. So people seem to be getting a message, and I've heard of a couple of instances where maybe there was a local bar here in the city limits of Ellensburg where a bunch of people went in the other night, and it probably was over the capacity that was allowed. And you know, that's in the city limits, but that's one thing where if we're called in as law enforcement, we need to basically, if we were asked to assist the city, then maybe that place gets cleared out and it gets a referral to you know, the licensing, liquor licensing or whatever, and maybe they pull the liquor license from that place. But education is still probably the most important way to go. There's other major criminals, major crimes going on still in our county, and I think we need to target those. We need to target the burglars, the drug crimes, and so whatever we could do to educate people. I mean, I think if we have a flyer out there to throw them and you know, show them what the governor's order is, it's a great idea. There are extreme cases where you're going to probably have to break up parties, and you know, again, keeping the deputy safe is important. Law enforcement luckily kind of naturally socially distances for safety anyway, so law enforcement's familiar with it, and I think educating people, contacting people. If worst case scenario we have to refer something to the prosecutor's office, that's up to them to decide if charges are warranted or not.
Great, thank you very much. Well, it's 6:56. We're perfectly on time. Time for closing statements. It'll be 2 minutes. Mr. Olson, you get to go first.
Okay. I want to be your next Kittitas County Sheriff, as there is a need for accountability, professionalism, transparency in all law enforcement agencies, including our current Sheriff's Office. As Sheriff, I plan on leading by example to the employees. I will wear a uniform. I will continue with being approachable and communicate with the Sheriff's Office staff and community. I will continue, as I demonstrated with the Washington State Patrol, to build strong partnerships with other agencies, organizations which make our community safer and officers safer. Given the current nationwide discussion on police reform, I think it is critical that law enforcement not only hold the respect they have earned, but earn the respect from the people that have yet to place their trust in. Changing leadership symbolizes that commitment and provides a renewed approach as our community grows and changes. I have 28 years of law enforcement experience. I'm college educated with an actual degree. The Washington State Patrol is known for its high level of training and professionalism, and I appreciate that having that opportunity to work for them, and it's something I plan on bringing to the Sheriff's Office. I have various levels of incident command training and command experience. I believe it's important to have a fresh set of eyes in the Sheriff's Office, which I will bring. And this is a quote that's from the Sheriff's webpage, and it says, "The office of the Sheriff has not only survived, it has flourished. The most significant issue regarding the longevity of the office lies with the concept it is an elected position. This allows members of the community to have impact on the selection process and removal process by virtue of their vote. Our current sheriff is just an interim sheriff, and he was appointed to the position as he was the only one. I think the people of this amazing county deserve a choice in November, and I believe I'm the best choice." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sheriff Myers, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity. As I said, I've been with the Sheriff's Office for going into my 35th year, and I've worked in every aspect. I've commanded every aspect, and it's that experience with both our local agencies, with our federal and state agencies, building those relationships that allow me to see well into the future and develop, you know, strategic plans for growth, for addressing the growth in the county, strategic plans for addressing the impacts on our infrastructure, working with the municipalities, the state and the federal agencies, so that we can address the things that are coming whether we want it or not. All of these things impact public safety. Working with the Rules Committee right now on addressing, you know, transportation of rail, crude oil on our rails. Working with the fisheries and when they're doing our restoration projects in our rivers, so that we make sure that we're not endangering people who are floating down the river or responders. This isn't a narrow field by any means. This is extremely broad. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And generally speaking, if you in your business or your home or your shops or your projects have something going, you get a fresh set of eyes when you come across a problem you can't solve, when you're struggling. I think a fresh set of eyes is great, but we need experience to continue doing what we're doing. My first day on the job, I changed things to bring us into the future. I changed our command structure. I changed our business model, and I immediately started working with our municipalities to address the change that's coming in our county. If you have any questions about our accountability or about our training, bring your eyes down to the sheriff's office. We'll walk you through it. You won't be disappointed. Thank you.
All right, well, we are out of time. I want to thank our two candidates very much for appearing with us this evening, but also their willingness to serve and protect our county. To all the voters out there, August 4th is primary. Ballots must be postmarked by August 4th or dropped in one of the drop boxes by 8 p.m. Thanks, everyone.